This is a movie I've been referring to that we're going to cover when we're talking about smart art, shapes, word art, and it's the alignment options. So we're going to go through the alignment options. We're going to look at the bring forward, send backwards, the selection pane functionality, the align commands, distribute commands. We have several snap to options. We can group the objects, we can ungroup the objects, and we have some rotation presets. So aligning objects. We're going to talk about aligning objects by using these three shapes, rectangles that are colored three different colors. But this functionality applies to, and this may not be a complete list, pictures, clip art, shapes, screenshots, smart art, charts, pivot charts, slicers, text boxes, word art, and equations. So I've got three objects, and invariably when you have more than one object, you're going to want to align them in some sort of way. Excel provides some functionality that makes it easy to do that. First, I'm going to select some of these shapes and I'm going to lay them over one another. And they stack in the order that I place them in the geographical area. The second one takes a more dominant position when I move it over on top of one that was already there. And the third one is the same way. But you can control this layering by going to the Format tab, the Drawing Tools, and I'll select the blue shape since it's in the back. I can left-click the drop-down and move it up one space. So now it's in front of the green rectangle, and I can move it up again to move it in front of the orange rectangle. Conversely, I can send it backwards one position, or send it backwards another position to put it where it started, and I can bring it forward all the way, or send it backward all the way. When you're dealing with shapes, sometimes it's more convenient to pull up the selection pane. You can send these forwards and backwards using the reorder buttons on the bottom of the selection pane. I've just sent that to the front and now I can move it to the back. I can select each one of these independent of one another. I can hold the control key down and select all of them if I want to. I can left click hide all, and then I can cherry pick the ones I want to show one at a time, and I can also individually select shapes to hide. I'm going to display all three shapes because the next thing we're going to do is align these. So I have a shape selected, and I can go back to the Format tab, left click the Align command in the Arrange group, and I've got all these options that are grayed out. Well, the reason for that is because you don't align one shape. You align several shapes, more than one. So I'm going to select the other two shapes by holding the control key down, left-clicking the green shape and the orange shape, and then go back to the Align command, where now they're not grayed out anymore. So the options are really self-explanatory. I can align them all to the left by left-clicking that. I can align them in the center, which Excel will pick sort of a midpoint and average the distance between the one on the left and the one on the right and center them all. I can align them to the right. I can align them to the top, self-explanatory once again. I can align them to the middle, and again, Excel is going to pick a midpoint vertically to align the shapes. And I can align them on the bottom, and Excel will pick the bottommost shape and align the other two evenly with it. I can distribute the shape evenly horizontally. So now the left shape is the same distance from the middle shape as the right shape is. I can distribute them evenly vertically. And the top shape is now an equal distance away from the middle shape as the one below it. And the next three options are toggle switches. You can turn them off or turn them on. Currently they're off. And in order to see this better, I'm going to turn the grid lines on so you can view the grid lines. Because the first option is snap to grid. And I've sized this green shape to be exactly equal to the grid lines. So it is exactly 4 columns wide and 8 rows high. And the reason I did that, because when you left-click Snap to Grid, I'm going to toggle that on, and I move this shape around using the arrow keys. When I left arrow, the shape jumps over one whole column. I right arrow, it does the same thing. When I press up arrow, it jumps up one row. Down arrow, it jumps another row. So when you have Snap to Grid on, it enables you to move these shapes in a sort of staccato fashion, so the placement is exactly on the grid lines. Another option that you can turn on, and I'm going to turn the Snap to Grid functionality off, is Snap to Shape. Again, we're moving one shape, but we're moving that shape so that Excel compares it to the positioning of another shape, and it snaps it to equal where that shape is. And I had no problem aligning this green shape up with the blue shape exactly. If you try this with it toggled off, you'll find it a bit more difficult to align it with an existing shape. So as you're moving your shapes around, you can also group them together and make a unified whole, sort of a shape cluster. And you do that by holding down the Control key, and the green shape is already selected, pressing the Control key, selecting the blue shape, and now the group command is available. It's not grayed out anymore, and I can left click and group these two shapes and then move them together like they were one shape. Left clicking the group command again, I can ungroup them, and I can even group groups. So if I have grouped these together and I select the orange shape, I can establish and create another group, and this is a group that consists of the orange shape and the other group that consists of the blue and the green shape. So I can move these around as a unified whole and rotate them like they were one shape. And when I ungroup this group, I still have this group, the blue and green shape, together as a group. And lastly, we have some rotational presets that allows us to rotate the shape 90 degrees, flip it vertically, flip it horizontally. You can't really see that with the shape that we're currently dealing with because it looks the same way either way. And I can gain more control over the rotation by launching the Format Shape dialog box. So that, at last, is arranging objects. We can bring objects to the foreground or move them to the background. We can pull up the selection pane and individually select the objects and move them to the foreground and background using the selection pane, and also control the visibility of all of the objects or the individual objects one at a time. We can align the objects that we selected in any one of a number of ways. To the left, to the right, to the top, to the bottom. We can distribute them evenly horizontally, vertically. We can move a shape and snap it to the grid, or we can move a shape and snap it to another shape that it's close to. We can group the shapes together so they become a cluster of shapes, and we can rotate the shape or shapes if they're grouped with the rotate command in the arrange group, where we can also launch the Format Shape dialog box that gives us more control over the rotational orientation of the shapes.